Space Podcast, Third Space Podcast, Third Space Podcast, Third Space Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Third Space Podcast, episode number 75, Rites and Wrongs. In this episode, Daniel and I discuss rites of passage. We've noticed that it seems like adolescence is growing longer and longer. The transition from childhood to adulthood, you can no longer pinpoint exactly when it happens. And maybe at some point in the past, you could point to getting a driver's license or turning 18, being able to drink alcohol or going to college. But it seems like now it's not quite so clear. People aren't necessarily engaging in all of those activities, certainly not engaging with them in the same way. There's the complicating factor of technology, social media, the internet, the dissolution of family, the degradation of social fabric. All of these things we talk about in relation to rites of passage and the formation of identity. I found it to be a very fun conversation. We definitely fell into third space a couple of times, so I hope you will enjoy it as well.
Third Space Podcast, Third Space Podcast, Third Space Podcast, Third Space Podcast.
Hello, Bennett.
Good morning. Top of the morning to you.
Top of the morning to you. How do you feel in the morning typically to just launch into a discussion? Like, is that a good time, or do you prefer evening? When are you most crisp for podcast style, third space oriented discussions?
You know, it might actually be the morning. I don't consider myself a morning person. In fact, I don't even like that phrase. I consider myself a had enough sleep person. So as long as I've had my 8 hours, or even better 9 hours, which is closer to my normal, then I'm pretty good. I'm pretty even keel after that. I guess there are times when I'm less ideally suited for third space, which would be in the midst of a work day, or when I felt kind of scattered, when I've got a lot of spinning dishes that I'm trying to keep spinning.
Yeah, the spinning dishes.
People spin dishes, right, on the little poles.
On little poles. That's just a thing people do a lot. Enough that it became a metaphor for our society. Just spinning lots of dishes.
Exactly. That's the analogy I'm going for. Anyway, that's a state of mind where I'm probably not ideally suited for third space, but can still fall into it with a little bit of nudging. But today, it's Washington's birthday, the holiday that we decided to keep that one. I think maybe.
Yeah, we'll keep it. We'll celebrate it.
We'll celebrate it today. So I got the day off. I've already had 2 weekend days behind me to kind of relax and forget that I have a job and just really enjoy some peace. So I would say right now I'm in a pretty good spot for third space. I'm feeling great.
I like that.
How about you?
Are you? Honestly, I'm ready and locked in for our conversation and happy to have it and well rested. Yeah. And then there's some things off air I'll share with you that are frustrating. But I'd rather not talk about that right now.
Me either.
Which is kind of a crappy thing to say.
Yeah. Everyone listening, we got some juicy tidbits going on, but we're not gonna discuss those.
Yeah. It'll be really interesting, but we'll save that for off air.
Right.
Yeah, like I've thought about, we've discussed waking up and how difficult it is for me, and you are very well regulated in general. Like, you would say you're even keel across the board emotionally, and just like Mr. Stable, we could call you, and so you get sleepy when you should, you wake up when you should, and you just are the degree of routine is, you're just a stable, and if you're an engine, you're just like well oiled, and it's humming along, all the pistons are firing.
Yeah.
And so waking up for you sounds like an experience that I don't really have, in terms of, you just, the way you've described it to me is you wake up and, well, it's not that remarkable. That's what's interesting, is there's not this struggle or this, oh my gosh, the morning, like, I do not want this. I have that wrestle, that episode, that battle, even on a morning like today with no alarm. I had to go, well, it was interesting because I did have enough sleep. So this is a good example. Just a good night's sleep. And I did not want to get up, and I still had the little battle. It was just a mild battle. It ranges from mild to severe, but you just don't have the battles. Like, this whole scale that I operate on doesn't exist in your life. I mean, not that you've never woken up tired or groggy or not wanting to wake up. That happens to you, I'm sure. Like,
Yeah, I have, certainly in the
trips
past.
and different things, but that's not a daily occurrence for you. And what's weird is I suspect I'm more in the typical range, even though what I want to say, what you experience should be more normal. But I think most people are like me. It's just waking up to this sort of miserable endeavor.
Do you think that that's more of a physiological thing, because you're chronically underslept, or a psychological thing?
I almost certainly a combination of the two. Because I'm not, like, in this recent era. I mean, Danielle goes to sleep around 8:30. I'm falling asleep by 9:30. Or I'm in bed asleep by 10. I wake up at 5:30. I'm on a good routine. So then sleeping in on the weekends, by the way, is like 7:30 or 8, and that's still early for like weekend waking up, and nice because I've slept in. So I guess that circadian rhythm or whatever is a little, like, 2 hours is significant. Like, maybe I shouldn't be doing that. But I don't know. I think it's really more just hum of it. Probably a little bit of anxiety and all of that. Like, I wake up and then think, oh, what should I be doing? And then there's a little bit of guilt of but I want to go back to sleep and that sort of thing. So, yeah.
Usually,
Anyway,
for me, like, it's pretty rare, but sometimes I will wake up at my normal time, like 7:30 in the morning or whatever, and it'll be a weekend, and I'll be annoyed that I woke up kind of on time, because I wanted to indulge and sleep in an extra. This morning was kind of like that. I woke up at 7:45, and I kind of wanted to sleep in just a little more, because
right.
it's Washington's birthday. Washington would have
Washington's
slept
birthday.
in.
It's cold outside. It's comfy under the covers. Beds are nice. Yeah.
Right. And yet I could not. And so I was a little there's a tiny battle there, which is, I'm awake, I'm conscious, there's light in my room, and I don't want to be awake. And so you kind of battle to try to kind of doze off and go back to sleep, but I think just over the years I've kind of learned or just become habituated to don't have that battle. Like, if you're conscious, you're just not going to get quality sleep again, so you might as well just get up.
And you're right. Not having that battle is the same as saying I'm never going to hit snooze. For me, the biggest change in my routine was I used to debate whether to work out right when I woke up or after school. Well, when you wake up and then make that decision, I'm going to go back to sleep and have this sort of fitful 45 minutes that is not satisfying. And then I might be tired. And if you're going to work out after work, there's reasons to not do it after work. You're tired. I have this other thing to do, whatever. So yeah. I've stopped debating myself in the mornings. And that lack of debate is actually really just smart. It's just don't debate it, just do it, because debating it is engaging in the suffering and prolonging the suffering that I'm talking about.
Yep.
So
what you got for me this morning?
All right, this is me rubbing my hands together.
I can hear it.
I've been thinking. This is how I think.
Yeah.
With Cosmo on the way.
Who's Cosmo?
Cosmo's my son.
Oh, okay. I don't think you've said his name on the podcast before.
Well, Cosmo, my son, is on the way.
A very third space name. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah, of the cosmos. In April, and here we are mid-late February. And I've been thinking about big picture ideas and what I want for him, and one thing I've noted, and this is not a particularly novel observation, but rituals and rites of passage are very important, and they serve as sort of markers for individuals and for the society to recognize that individual's growth, right? So like, how do you transition from a boy to a man or from a girl to a woman? And how do you know you're on that right path? And so usually they are sort of societally or socially constructed, and then they are. I mean, it's kind of like, well, weddings or marriage. Marriage is an institution, and the wedding is a ceremony, a rite of passage to go from single to like a couple, a married couple. And it's obvious to me that the couple doesn't necessarily need it to know that they are in fact committed to one another, but there's value in the society coming together and recognizing that, and it feels like there's a simultaneous acknowledgement. And I even think about the way we have school set up with grades 9, 10, 11, 12, whatever, and graduation's a big ceremony, or getting your driver's license. You transition from a non-driver to a driver, or a high school student to alumni, or and these things are important, because otherwise, like, I need to look at someone and sort of gauge where they're at. I like knowing that they've gone through these markers, so I know to treat them with, I mean, honestly, especially you, not working with students, you'd see a 16-year-old or a 19-year-old or possibly a 23-year-old, you'd just be like, I don't know, until you've learned they have their degrees or have graduated or whatever. And so I think these markers are really pivotal, yet I think they've been slowly as we become more casual, these rites of passage have become less and less. I think they used to exist far more. I'm not saying we should return to some like tribal days where we like send boys off to live in a hut to transition into a man when they're 13. I think there's some, like, because a lot of these rites of passage are harsh because you need to turn like a soft boy into a tough man, and I think there's validity in toughening someone up. I'm not criticizing that, but I'm saying we don't need to like beat someone, or like gang initiations, those are actual rites of passage, and involve violence frequently. So we've deconstructed them, but it occurred to me that even in healthy societies of yesterday, like before they were deconstructed, they still were absolutely focused on the youth. Which I think that's a good thing, by the way, because youth are like lost, don't have a sense of identity, or looking for it. And identity, to me, is so deeply socially constructed. That's one of the problems we have with. I'll just toss that question before we get into my big question. But do you think that identity should be largely socially constructed, or is it completely internal? And I have some thoughts, but I don't want to lead you anymore.
Well, you threw a whole lot out there.
Sorry, I talked a little too long.
So all right. So I'll answer your question first. Should identity be socially constructed, or should it be internal? Well, I think it's inevitable that it's socially constructed. I don't like the phrase socially constructed. It has a lot of strings attached to it, but no man lives on an island, as they say.
Yeah.
And so we inevitably have social connections with other people, and our behaviors are influenced inevitably by the people around us. They see our actions and respond, and we respond to their actions and reactions. We have reputations that we try to upkeep. And so our identity is going to be formed by the roles that we take in society. And that doesn't mean that you have to be a community leader or a deacon at your church, or even care about your job, or even have a job at all. But you're going to have some relationship to your parents, your children, your other relatives, your friends, your neighbors. Yeah. And those interactions are going to influence your identity.
So those roles you play absolutely matter.
Totally.
I appreciate what you're doing, because you're defining identity in the traditional sense.
Well,
can I ask you then a follow-up? Like, would
sure.
you say that, are we on a trend? It seems that we are redefining identity as more internal, and that if society wants to contribute to that definition, you take offense to it instead of listen. Because traditionally it's a feedback culture, and this is good because it helps you know if you're on the right path or not, or if you want to in fact critique and be on the out, like that's all fine. But I'll let you kind of go off on what you think about like identity currently defined as, if you disagree with my internal construction solely, then I should take offense.
Well, I think, unsurprisingly, a large contributor to this change is the internet and social media. And people spend a large, especially younger people, spend a larger and larger percentage of their time online on social media. And so compare two interactions. Compare the interaction where you go hang out with your friends after school, for example, and maybe you crack some jokes and your identity ticks a couple more ticks towards the kind of class clown funny person in your friend group
Yeah.
or something. Or maybe you don't make a couple jokes, maybe you're actually timid and you're too afraid to speak, then your identity ticks a little bit more towards kind of that introverted nerd type or something. Well, whatever the case, the actions that you're taking are ticking your identity towards some kind of collection of traits that are going to reinforce themselves, and you're going to
Yeah.
internalize that stuff. Okay, well, now shift that to you're spending 30, 40, maybe upwards of your time online, and your audience isn't a narrow friend group of 7 or 8 people. It's thousands, millions of people online who actually don't care about you or have any sort of bond to you whatsoever, and you're receiving their feedback nebulously and vaguely through short bits of text. You're making lots of inferences that you probably shouldn't. Many are probably wrong. There's a huge amount of error, and you're not able to put an action out there into the ether and receive a reaction clearly. There's a lot of noise. And so you say you crack a joke or something on Twitter or whatever, then who knows what's going to come back at you, right? Like if you crack a joke about a topic that perhaps you shouldn't, you might get an extreme amount of hate thrown back your way. You might be
Right.
totally ignored, or you might go viral for a reason you didn't expect. Like you don't know what you're gonna get, and it's not tailored to you personally. Like people aren't taking into account all the other instances of their interaction with you. And so it's actually totally and utterly disconnected from your actual identity. And so you can take that false information and integrate it and start to build a self that actually isn't representative of the real the way the real world perceives you. And that's where I think a lot of this conflict comes in, is because people will start to construct an identity, and let's be real, most people don't get back tons of hate or tons of adoration. They get back nothing. And so that allows them to just create their own identity totally without feedback, and you
No
could
checks and balances.
no checks and
Yeah.
balances. You can build whatever you want out of yourself. And that sounds really empowering and freeing until you take a step back into the real world and you try to pretend that you are this created persona in the real world. And then you get slapped pretty hard because people scoff at you or think you're a total weirdo, or they just don't believe you or whatever. And that causes, a lot of friction.
And that maps onto the idea of mental health being a lot more, I'll think of a better phrase than socially constructed, but like outwardly generated than you would think. Like the checks and balances are really important. And the distinction you made between, I want to use two terms and see if they're agreeable to you: network versus community. And I'm going to say that the social digital networking is transient, it's massive, it's everything you were saying, that like they don't know you well, it's easy to get in, it's easy to get out, it's different, it's evolving, it's faster than we can keep up with. And by contrast, I'll say community is the people in your life where it's actually harder to get out, right? Like you have to deal with the friction and things. So if you have your friend group at school, like even if you fight, even if you decide these aren't the friends I'm going to be with, you still have to find some way to manage because you still have class together
Yeah.
or whatever, and your family, so that in-person sense of community and versus the network. And so to me, what that I don't know, we think so much alike in terms of feedback from a network is either non-existent or insincere, not insincere, but so wildly incomplete and possibly insincere. It's just the Wild West. It's just like, who knows?
Yeah,
It's not reliable. It's not something you want to base much on.
it's miscalibrated. Like it's just not
Yeah.
the inputs you're feeding into the network and the outputs you're receiving just are almost certainly not connected.
Yeah, yeah. And that is well, it's a recipe for poor mental health, which is what we're seeing play out, with people spending increasing times in digital networks and less time in, in-person communities, and then they're just like they're absolutely I mean, I feel like this is just the big conversation. This is one of
Yeah,
our
yeah.
big conversations, but it's
Well,
just
it's a conversation of our time. Like it's a conversation that we as a society have to work out. We must
yeah.
I don't like the whole let's have a conversation. I don't like that phrase either. But this is a problem, and as a species, we must figure out this problem, or things turn dire. Things are already dire, I think. Like the dissolution of social connections, the social fabric fraying, the mental health issues that you
The
point out.
lack of rites of passage, which is kind of my point.
That's what I was going to
Yeah.
ask. Like all right, so we have all these problems, we've acknowledged those, and you're suggesting that traditionally rites of passage helped to form a more solid identity. And here we are in the present with identities that are self-made and wrong, incompatible with reality, and a rite of passage might be able it won't go all the way to fixing the problem, but it might be a step in the right direction. That's what you're suggesting?
I am. And I'm also saying that these rites of passage tell us how to relate to ourselves, even as boys and girls and men and women. And so, not only, I think most people would agree, hey, we've gone a little too far and we need more rites of passage, but they might give pause to me saying, we need to teach little boys how to be boy. Like we would, there'd be a temptation to make this not a gender specific. It's just all humans need these particular,
Right. Oh, I can definitely see
rites
that
of passage.
temptation, but it's stupid.
Well, I just because like, what does it mean to be a boy? And then you see these trends. If like what happens is we like this has always been the case from my understanding is that little girls have been more liberally oriented and little boys have been more conservative oriented, and that makes sense that girls are more socially conscious and then aware of those who are dispossessed and wanting to look out for them, and boys are more interested in things and wanting to go out and like their sense of perhaps individuality or just lack of awareness of the greater community might lead. I mean, who knows? But the point is that those have always existed, but they're becoming way more extreme. So like girls are becoming far more of the social justice warrior type, and boys are actually they tend to be quiet in person. They will not like push back. They'll just kind of listen, but then they go to their digital networks and saying, particularly white boys, and then seeing where like if they've been told it's not great to be this, then they go online and then saying like, no, others are wrong, you're good for being white, and all of a sudden we have these identity politics playing out, identitarianism or whatever the term is.
Yeah.
So we just don't know how to talk to boys about being boys and girls about being girls. We're almost scared to. In fact, it's not that we don't know how to. It's we're like a little bit unwilling to engage in that conversation. So we've deconstructed not only general rites of passage, growth. We keep birthdays and we keep grades and we give a driver's license and you graduate.
Well, that's
about it.
That's actually what I was going to ask. Like, what rites of passage that we used to have do we still have? Like you say, driver's license, and I would agree. Like when I was thinking about what are the rites of passage for particularly young men, young boys, and driver's license seems like the one, right? That's the one. You're 16, you're 15 getting a learner's license, and 16 getting a license. But I've heard, and I haven't looked up the numbers on this, but I've heard that we're in some weird place where fewer and fewer teenagers are actually getting their driver's licenses,
Yes.
and they're just kind of putting that off, which is very strange and foreign to me because I mean, even when we were teenagers, getting a driver's license was a huge deal and something everyone looked forward to. So
Yeah, it was their ticket to freedom.
what's going on there? Like why is this rite of passage, this ritual of gaining a vehicle and gaining some independence, why is it deteriorated?
Um, uh, Again, it goes back to the digital world is the important world to teenagers, and they already have had access to it for a very long time. So
I see.
if all their they like it used to be, I can't wait to get away and go hang out with my friends, and again, those communities, and you might get into a little trouble or do this and that, but like you were unsupervised. But the problem is we've tightened up the sort of physical safety, put that at a there's no free
Risk.
range kids are running around. There's no one at the playground, kids unsupervised. Can you imagine leaving your kid at a playground right now? I mean, they'd call the cops and call Child Protective Services on you if you just left a kid in a playground. But like, so we've been overprotective in the physical world and underprotective, completely underprotective in the digital world. And so they have all the freedom they want. So why would they get together? Like, what are they doing? They're playing video games. Well, boys specifically are more drawn to, but they have all the access in the world digitally. So why do they need to get together
Let me ask
physically?
let me ask this then. If why do we require a license and an age limit for driving on the road?
I mean, I imagine just well, there's some obvious reasons like maturity and cognitive functioning and ability, skill, all kind of come into fruition. Like, imagine in theory, like clearly they're talented 7, 8, 9 year olds at complex video games and these complex tasks, so they have the capability, but they might not be physically big enough to operate a vehicle. So that's part of it. But understanding your role on the road might not be. I mean, are you capable of grasping that at 9, 10, 11, 12? Probably not. And you're starting to. We're on the early side to me. It's like you're pretty young. You're a kid. You're 14. You're 15 years old. You're in ninth grade, and you get your learner's permit, and you're all of a sudden with adult supervision allowed to drive on the road with adults. So we're definitely on the early end, but it just makes sense to have some sort of gateway to say, or gatekeeping, and go like, you can't just can't hand a vehicle to anyone. And
So
I don't know the reason, the brain science behind why 16 to drive. I'm not really sure.
So it's a complicated machine which requires some amount of intellectual, mechanical, and maturity, intellectual and mechanical capability and maturity to operate. You're on the road with other people, and so there's a safety concern as
Yeah, the
well.
risk-taking factor, because like
The
a
risk.
9-year-old might take more risks and not understand the risks involved.
So
So
how is this different from using social media or being a digital, being in the digital space? Like, it just makes me think that if we're positing that, historically, before in the pre-internet age, a driver's license was a rite of passage because it allowed a young person to obtain that freedom that they so desperately want. And it serves as a transition from immaturity to maturity. And it actually does put them in a space with some danger and risk, but also reward. How is it conceptually different from the internet? Like, should we, if history took a different path and we discovered the internet before cars, that's ridiculous, but like, would we have internet licenses? Would you have to turn 17, 16, or 17 or 18 and get your internet license before you could have that rite of passage and go online and have that freedom to hang out with your friends playing Call of Duty or Clash of Titans or whatever the heck, Fortnites, whatever the kids are playing these days on their videotapes? Like, would you need that, and then and the car thing is totally separate, but like, do you see the parallel that I'm drawing?
I definitely do. I think it's completely analogous. The only difference is and this goes back to the physical safety. Like I think we adopted some. Jonathan Haidt calls it safetyism,
Yeah.
right? This worship of our primary highest value in parenting should be to keep them physically safe. Like if it saves one life, or we're so terrified of like adult molestation or the razor and the candy, that as the world and there's like a big crime wave in the 70s and 80s, but kids were still latchkey kids running around and say, see you at dinner time, you know, not know there was no phones to connect. There was actual real danger out there. And then as the world got safer, but I think as, you know, 24-hour news cycles and the beginning of clickbait era, far before we had the terminology or even the internet to call it clickbait, but the oh my gosh, red alert, there's
Amber alert.
There's scary stuff
Yeah,
out
think about
there.
that. Just Amber alerts get beamed straight to your phone, whether you want it or not. Of course, I turn all of mine off. You have to dig down
What a
into your
jerk. You don't care about ambers.
you have to
Only
dig
ambers,
down into
you
your
know?
settings just to figure out how to turn them off. But like, it's no wonder people are paranoid. You get every bad thing that happens in the whole world, in a sense,
And
beamed straight
discussions
to
of
you.
bullying and the
Bullying,
bullying
sure.
and the physical safety the compromise of that. So it's simple, and it's so I think we adopted safetyism as our like de facto value, and we said that anything to keep them safe, and we neglected, like, because that's the primary difference. Everything you said about what, like, there's danger, there's community, there's harm, you know, there these elements, like, we should require some sort of potential like digital, I mean, I don't say we should, but the idea of giving a license to navigate these digital realms is not absurd if we don't think giving a
I
license,
wonder
just some sort
when
of check and balance,
I
you know,
wonder
some sort of thing.
I wonder when we actually started having driver's licenses. So surely we didn't have horse and buggy
Yeah,
licenses.
no way we,
Right?
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, like, and then the car was invented in the early 1900s, and people were driving. You know,
My
I seem to
my
remember
dad,
historically.
and I have.
Go
There,
ahead.
there had to so my granddad, my dad would tell this story, but my granddad driving, no joke, and I want to go verify this, but like a school bus, for like, he would go around and help with the school bus, and he was 14 years old, and he was driving older kids sometimes.
Yeah.
He was part of the driving system. He'd get in the bus and go pick up the kids,
Right.
and it
Well,
was just like,
well, see,
I doubt there was a license thing
I know. Well,
involved, you
I
know.
don't think so. Like in the early era, early automobile era, of course, the government wasn't making this widespread system of licensing, and there were no standards, and it was just kind of a how I imagine it was. In fact, I'm almost certain it was whether your parents thought you were mature enough to operate this machine. Like, you know, before
Yeah.
we had cars, certainly you would let your young child or teenager ride a horse, you know, or pull the little farming cart or whatever, you know, like you would let them do that. And so when we got the automobiles, you know, there's no difference. Like it's a machine, it's a pragmatic tool to get from point A to B. And so when your kid is old, it is actually physically able to manipulate the levers and wheels and everything, and they have the maturity to understand what they're doing, then let them do it. And so there was no licensure. So and then the government got involved, and then it kind of became a more uniform rite of passage to actually get your license. And you can argue about whether that's a good or a bad thing, but I guess where I'm kind of going is if we wanted to get back to the more natural, emergent state of things, when would your kid be allowed to go online? Well, when the parents who should be very keyed into their kids' emotional and psychological maturity, when they think it's appropriate. And the thing about it too, another parallel that a reason why that analogy doesn't fit so well is that think back to the past, the adults in the early 1900s were very aware of how dangerous it was to ride a horse or to ride in an early
Right.
early vehicle, or the physical risk of being out on the road or whatever. But now adults are totally and utterly ignorant for the most part of the dangers of the internet. It's
Yeah.
the kids are more aware than the adults. And so the adults actually have no authority to grant that freedom, that license, the internet license, because they have no idea. They don't know what's going on. So it's a flipped upside down world from what it used to be.
And everything I said, or excuse me, everything I read or read says that social media 16, which is to give them a flip phone, give them a phone. This isn't about the phone.
Yeah.
People use the word phone for, like, you can text, by the way, because you're usually texting your community
Yeah.
and not some network, right?
Yep.
And but it's the introduction to social media if it's too early, and it disproportionately affects girls, and it just 16 seems to be the age. And I know some parents that or at least I know some students that follow through and almost like they didn't get it until we're talking 10th grade,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Their first semester of 10th grade, and they go, yeah, I got it this year, but I see all my friends and they're so stressed and they're not managing their time well. Like, these are well-rounded kids that tend to say it. I just want to say that they are like the cool kids to me. They might, they seem balanced and thoughtful, and they're not. I think a lot of kids are fish that don't see the water. They're swimming in these digital waters and not seeing. And adults are constantly saying, "Get out, like, this is terrible. Get out of the water." But they, like you said, adults don't have the knowledge, so it falls on deaf ears because it just seems so. Adults are speaking to kids from ignorance on one sense. They might deeply realize what the literature is saying, and their advice might be solid, but there's no credibility there because they just don't know all the trends and stuff. So it's easy for a kid to dismiss it. Plus, I think kids will say, "Yeah, I know it's bad," but it's kind of like we say, "Oh, Amazon's bad for the workers, the environment, the insert whatever." There's always criticisms about Amazon. It used to be about Walmart, right?
Yeah.
But like we went to Walmart and order from Amazon now, so we just kind of go, "What you gonna do?" There's this mentality that's it's so overwhelming. It's here. I mean, people, adults, myself included. Oh man, I'm on my phone too often. But what you gonna do? It's current year. It's overwhelming. And so these kind of these big solutions require, I guess, like collective actions. Like, it requires parents getting together and saying, "Hey, we're not going to give a phone to our kids," or a school saying, "We're not going to," and then you really double down on the sense of community. And that way, when a kid, even if it's just half the kids in the community are also not on their phones, well then, or on social media, well then they're going to get together and hang out, and it'll be great. It'll be great.
So put aside the issue the issues of authoritarianism or government largesse or whatever. Would it be a better world if we could snap our fingers and magically we had an call it an internet license or a social media license, or we could define the boundaries of what it covered, but very much like a driver's license, you have to be 16. You can get your learner's permit, and with supervision you can go on the internet or whatever, and you're exposed to Twitter, and you can see, you can make a tweet tentatively, but it has a special learner, I'm a caution student tweeter or whatever on the little label.
I really like that.
And then you go into, the IMV, or no, it wouldn't be the department. I was trying to do Department of Motor Vehicles, the Internet of Motor
Department of
Vehicles.
Social Media.
Yeah,
DSM.
whatever, whatever it is. You get. Oh, that's ironic. The DSM,
Yeah.
the diagnostics. What is the actual one? The psychological. It's the Diagnostics and Statistics Manual. Is that what it is? That records the all of the different disorders and everything.
Yeah, I think that's what it is, the DSM.
Anyway, you go into some office and you have to take a test that proves that you're aware of the rules of the internet or whatever. Anyway, would that be a better world? Like, would that step us towards better health for young people or not? Would it establish a new rite of passage that's actually valued, where the driver's license is kind of fading and not becoming such a defining feature? This would take us to a better place.
Yes, I think so, but I'm hesitant. I wish I could snap my finger twice and add it in conjunction with another thing. So, like, yes, some sort of gatekeeping that just needs to be dealt with, particularly access to pornography too. Like, that some gatekeeping needs to be happening. Maybe. At least, like, I'm attracted to that idea. I wish I could also snap my finger and go back to when these tools, these social media sites, Twitter and whatnot, like get published, I wish there was some consultation. I don't know. You might balk at this idea. I wish there were like some sort of philosopher or ethicists or moral people coming together, because I don't feel like there was a discussion. The discussion was all like, this is a cool tool. How can we make it the most interesting? How can the driving question behind these tools was, how can we create engagement? And there was no, I don't feel like there was any conversation about, well, what does that engagement do to our social fabric? And I wish that at the launch of these very powerful tools that could have been considered. And I feel like the reason that seems like it belongs, I know they seem like two separate points, the like, hey, access when you're mature enough, but like is anyone, I mean, this, if we buy into the idea of psychological addiction and the seriousness of that, like, it just is like, I mean, an age thing helps, but you're still just,
Yeah. I mean,
you're still creating a dumpster fire. It's just like, you don't get access to the dumpster fire until you're 16. It's like, well, then the hope is that you reject on your own.
right. Well,
you reject the dumpster
that's
fire.
the problem, I think. So I do balk a little bit at what you're saying, like bringing in some expert class to dictate to us how to make it better, or what red tape to put up to, to restrict the engagement. Like, I hate all of that stuff. So I definitely balk at that. What we've lost, like the role, who is supposed to inform the immature, the young, the people who don't have experience yet about the dangers of the world? It's their parents. Like, it's the adults.
Yeah.
It's the people with the wisdom and experience to know what the consequences of certain actions are going to be. Like, what comes to mind is casinos. Casinos have existed for a long time. They have addictive bright lights and games, and their whole job is to maximize engagement, and it's dangerous for adults. But we don't let
Yeah.
kids run around and gamble in casinos, right? Like, there's been some,
And
and
we've really held the line about where they can even be, which I think might be smart. Like, I don't know.
right, but I imagine in the olden days that it wasn't so much done by government intervention. It was that, parents just kept their kids from going into casinos. Maybe there was some other practical thing, like, well, kids don't have money, so
Yeah.
they can't
Yeah.
gamble very much. But like, that's what I think we've lost, is that, as technology's progressed at an ever increasing rate. So, to be fair to adults, it's hard to keep your finger on the pulse of technology and keep up with what's going on. Like, ask your dad about the latest AI developments, and he's not going to know, what's going on, or he's not going to be able to conceptualize fully the risks involved. And so, I sympathize with that, but that's still your job. That's your job as an adult, as a parent, to keep your eyes and ears open to the world, and impose, or not impose, but to educate your kid about how to navigate that world. Like, it's your job to instill in them the moral capacity to self-discipline. So
Yeah.
if you've done your job right, then even if your kid is exposed to a casino, or to internet porn, or to Twitter, or to whatever it is, they can see it and go, this doesn't feel right. I'm gonna refrain, or I'm gonna ask my parents about it, or I'm gonna ask some other adult that I'm comfortable with, or I'm gonna discuss it with my friends, or whatever the case is. Like, there's some slow down moment where you say, something doesn't feel right about this. That's your job. And I think that over the past probably 50, 60 years, like even since before we were born, that has degraded, and that's not present so much anymore.
For sure. I think it goes back to the sense of community and this idea that it takes a village to raise a kid. And we don't have villages anymore. The distrust, I mean, born out of safetyism. Oh, this adult isn't going to, my neighbor isn't going to act as a stand in for an aunt or an uncle. They're more like potential molesters. Shut the door. And like, I believe, and I might be wrong here, but like, if kids
Oh,
were out playing, what?
sorry, I had an invasive joke pop into my head. Do you mind if I interrupt with it real
Yeah.
quick? So
Yeah,
for
please.
ever since you told me that your kid's name is going to be Cosmo, I've been trying to think what a reasonable middle name would be, and I was
Yeah.
trying to think of funny ones, and I think Lester is a good candidate. So
Cosmo Lester. I mean, it physically hit you, that joke.
it did, yeah,
I can't even see you, but it made you go, oh, like, like the impact of that.
yeah.
Oh.
All right, sorry. Now I've
So
totally derailed the thought.
no, I can
Continue.
get there. So imagine the free range play. Kids are out at they're hanging out. This is the 60s, 70s, 80s, whatever. They're out biking around, and then they're up to a little bit of no good because they're kids and they're testing boundaries, and it's what they do. I think neighbors would
Yeah,
also help steer the course and go, "What are you doing?" or "Get off my lawn," or "You shouldn't be doing that." I think
right.
there was, and yeah, I think it maybe aired on like some adults were jerks and some were kind, and but there really was a collective mentality, and I think we not only have shied away from that, but like not only do we hide our kids from others, but like as a conscious adult, we don't feel empowered or like hey, what are you doing? Like stop, cut that out. I don't think people are correcting
Yeah.
transgressions in public at all.
Well, I think
And I think kids are emboldened by that too, in a bad way.
not to take us too far afield, but I think part of the reason for that is that adults are busy. Like
Yeah, yeah.
it used to be the case that the dad was out working during the day and the mom was at home, taking care of the kids or whatever. And you had that division where the kids always had some adult around. And now, like a typical household, both the mom and the dad are working and busy with their jobs. And
And I suspect their jobs are even more insane than they were. Like just the
yeah,
man's
right.
job in the past. Let's just on a bar of productivity, or let's just put a number out there. They're doing 70 now. Two parents are working at
Yeah.
100.
Well,
Like, and so they just don't have the
well,
capacity.
think about it
Like,
too. Like, aside from simply the time capacity, the mental capacity has increased too because now, well, it used to be, we had a landline phone and you don't get that many phone calls about work or whatever, depending on your job, of course. But now today, you're kind of always on call and you've always got your
yeah.
phone in your pocket and it could buzz with an email at any time. Anytime all of your various subscriptions get updated, you've got an email whenever your bills are all online and you're getting notifications all the time on your phone to manage adult crap. And so like the mind space of a typical adult today is just definitely more dominated by
So
external things and not things relegated to your family or certainly not raising your kids unless
in this
unless you're
context, go ahead.
very disciplined, unless you're extremely disciplined
Yeah,
as a
yeah.
parent, then you're going to have your attention sucked away by so many other things. So actually, I'm trying to be a little sympathetic to parents of today. Like there are more challenges, or at least different challenges to actually doing your duty as a parent.
100%. Because this is why safetyism is so attractive. I can baby proof my apartment and I can make sure they're not around any potential molesters, and I've done my parent duty, at least by societal standards. I can pat myself on the back. I don't have time for the complicated inner workings of the internet, like, or and all the woes that might accompany. So, and because that's sort of mysterious to parents or older people anyway, it's just like, well, you know, and if all the kids are doing it, I don't want my kid to be left out.
Yeah.
So the point is, like, it really, I think we're at a time that's more crucial than ever, is to get that sense of community,
Yeah.
and in which there are adults that can, so that they're not just getting messaging. I mean, this has always been true too. As you're a kid entering into adolescence and starting to become more independent, you think your parents are idiots because, and you're still thinking in black and white terms. You're seeing hypocrisy, or and you're coming at them hard. You're like
Yeah.
upset with it, and it's all natural because you're supposed to gain independence and you're supposed to break free. So this friction is totally normal. But if we are more siloed than ever, and they aren't hearing multiple messaging from the adult world and whatnot,
Yeah.
like from other sources that they respect, because teacher respect toward teachers is low, and institutions is low. It's just really you can see why it's a nightmare out there.
Yeah.
So like, and then this actually and the degradation of religious communities, because there's that sort of moral, these are like tight knit communities that operate in with a moral framework underpinning everything they do, and like how to live a good life. Those are so important, with that kind of falling by the wayside. Like, what is left? You just have this digital networks that kids get plugged into really early, and it's, I mean, a total nightmare. Total nightmare.
Yeah, and the digital networks too. We talked earlier about from an individual kid's perspective, they're just they're kind of like self-building. I imagine like some clay figurine, and it's a person made of clay, and they're grabbing handfuls of clay and just slapping it onto themselves and building up their own identity however they want. But that's fragile.
Yeah.
Well, every user of the internet is like that. Everyone is building these clay figurines that are fragile and not representative of the real world, and people are looking at each other's fake avatars and using those as kind of mirrors to determine how they build their own. So it's just this whole fake avatar world that isn't representative. So yeah, it's just not.
It also has no connection to the past, so there's no wisdom
Right.
of, like, it's all like,
Yeah.
it's built on maybe some good things, some new popped up things, but mostly garbage, because like new knowledge is untested, or new ideas. And so with no connection to the past, that's another sense of like, when you don't have community, when you don't have other adults that I can turn to when I'm freaked out that Cosmo, like, hasn't spoken, and he's like a month behind, and I'm going, well, is this bad? They're like, just chill out. Like, that is good to have people to help me establish back to identity, like, this is normal, like, relax. And that sense of and I think back to religious communities too, that's what like religion is in many senses, like collective wisdom, right? And it's passed along. But if we have a sort of new society that's built 5 minutes ago based on untested things, and that's what the digital networking is just a force to be reckoned with, just a roar of new stuff that's untested, and I don't know, dizzying. Like, looking to that. Also, just a side note, I don't know if this folds into it very well or not, but like the idea that parenting, like the professional working class you were talking about, like, and women going to work, and we become more educated, so we started transitioning our type of how to raise kids. We started to see them almost as like educational projects. If we can just like carve them in a certain way, we started treating them like projects, and that instead of, I've heard it referred to as carpenter versus gardener. Like, it's really, parenting's more like a garden. Like, that it's been planted, the child, it will grow. You just kind of try to remove weeds and nurture it how you can, instead of trying to chisel away and shape out of a block what you think you can. But we've been treating more and more, as we're more and more educated, we just turn to like experts, and we think, if I play classical music and all of that, then I'll get the baby out. I'll get the baby genius or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thought. I think that some carving has to be done. Like that, you kind of get into the nature nurture discussion there.
I think that is an analogy for that.
I mean, I do tend towards the gardening analogy more. Like, you're definitely preparing the soil, you're removing the weeds, all like you say. But I think there's some pruning that has to be done. Like, you do take action. You do take some action to mold your child into who you think they should be. You have to be delicate about it. If you prune too much, then it can be damaging. But you don't want some wild, unkempt growth, that gets lopsided and falls over or something, So, taking that analogy pretty far. Let me ask, so we've really focused on young adulthood, right? The transition between adolescence and adulthood a lot. And I think maybe at the very beginning you alluded to other time frames in life that maybe needed a rite of passage. I want to toss out one more kind of leading into adulthood and just get your quick thoughts on it, and then maybe we can talk about some of the others. But like some other countries do mandatory military service. Like I think South Korea is one where you have to do 2 years of mandatory military service. That seems like a pretty solid rite of passage. Like I don't mean solid in terms of promising. I mean solid in terms of like you're definitely going to experience some amount of internal change by doing that. Like, do you think that is a good thing or a bad thing? A mandatory military service at maybe from 18 to 20 or something.
There's a lot of benefits. It would increase your sense of community and patriotism, and because if you're gonna go, like, the stakes are high if you're gonna do military service, and since there's potential combat, like you're invested because your safety is now potentially at risk, and others if you don't. So there's a lot of growing up that would go on, and collaboration and camaraderie and sense of community. So all of that is like off the charts good. It makes me sad. Well, there's some real infringement on freedom.
I mean, we already have
and
mandatory education.
yeah, it's a little big brothery for me in terms of, yeah, you will be doing this. I really would have to back up and wrestle with what am I okay with? Because like the more involved your community is, the more, I mean, that's the tension, the individual and the community. And community is a nice word, but like government, then I'm like all of a sudden going,
Yeah.
Government mandates versus community encouragements,
Yeah.
And because I want rites of passage to be like the reason they're there is they're important, and not going through them would suggest, yeah, you might not be on the path within this community that is appropriate. You know, so and just to say that like there's a little bit of sadness that the world exists in such a way as that in which you like will be prepared to fight, but like the world's a tough place and no one's promising you just peace and happiness all the time. So I don't.
I mean, I kind of am in the same place as you. I have the same distrust of the government, and I'm very very leery of the big brothery aspects that you mentioned. However, I think the benefits probably would outweigh the costs, considering the state that we're in right now. Like young people are aimless and immature. They have no rites of passage. They lack discipline. They lack camaraderie, community, and patriotism is like
Yeah.
at an all-time low. And a 2 year military service would work to remedy all of those things. And it's not like, I mean, we would have millions of people in doing this, and it's not like all of them are going to see active combat. Like actually, you probably wouldn't send those people in active combat, right? You would send them to boot camp and have them do some drills and that kind of thing. So it's not like you would be sending these kids onto the front lines necessarily. It would just be, I think it would be pretty much wholly good. And look, think about it too. Like right now, our adolescence goes until you're about 26. Like there is no clear dividing line from when you're a kid and when you're an adult. Like we have so many kids in their 20s or even early 30s. And there are a lot.
That's actually a huge problem.
It's a
right?
gigantic
Yeah.
problem, and there are lots of reasons for that. But imagine if every 21-year-old actually felt like an adult, which that's ridiculous to say now. That's almost laughable to suggest that you would come across any 21-year-old and they would feel and interact like an adult. But if you had some mandatory military service, I think a greater proportion of 21-year-olds would feel like adults afterwards.
Yes. Yeah. I agree. And given our current circumstances and how lost young people are, that calls for more drastic measures to address the issues. And given, I kind of think that I would like to see that experiment play out, because we got to do something big, and we've got to restore a sense of community, and this speaks to all of that. Yeah, and we need more. I know that's really young adult, and some people say you're not even an adult at that age. But the problem is you need to be becoming one, because
Yeah.
it might be fine at 21, but it's a heck of a lot less cute by 25 and 30 and 35. Like it's time to grow up, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think that we have a lack of milestones or rites of passage in the young adult and middle-aged like adult world. Like the idea is once you're married and having kids is it's obviously a rite of passage, but we as a community, I've been thinking about this, I'm not so sure, like
No, it's not.
like we welcome the kid into the world with gently and all the right, I think in a lot of great ways, but we don't welcome the couple into parenthood necessarily. We're just kind of like, yeah, I guess that you could say there's a baby shower, but it's still a baby shower. It's not a parenting shower. There's just a lot less. It's all about the baby, which I think it should lean that way. But it would be nice if there was almost like separate,
I mean,
a delineation, and we said you are becoming parents. This is a huge deal. You're the one with the
the
influence.
problem the problem is the social degradation that I alluded to before. Like, we don't do that because, well, one reason is because many couples aren't having kids. I think the U.S. replacement rate is like 1.5 or something. So people aren't having enough kids. And then the second reason is that so many people aren't married. Like, it's not like you have your normal mom, dad, and they're having their first kid. There are a lot of single parents and children out of wedlock. And yet you can roll your eyes and say that this is a tired observation, but it's the truth. And a lot of the problems that we're seeing, and the reason why we don't have this rite of passage that's uniform anymore, is because a lot of people aren't following that traditional pattern that has shown positive results. And so we're reaping the costs of that.
It just occurred to me too that like we do all this emphasis on the baby then because it's safer, because like, you know, maybe we'll offend someone if we talk about parenthood or the couple or something when it's really just a single parent or whatever. So we really emphasize the baby, and the baby's born and gets that messaging that they're kind of like, and it's no wonder that their sense of identity, then they get online too early and they're just developing their sense of identity that's completely internal, and that gets reinforced by our cultural messaging of, hey, like imagine even the power couple that's raising their kid and it's like, we want to get you into a good college. Like, that is your purpose. Your entire being is like either getting that scholarship or playing that sport or whatever, but it's all about you instead of your existence within a greater community and your role being defined. And like, because I think kids and young adults and anyone needs, you talk about an all-time low of feeling a sense of belonging or purpose. Well, if you're just saying getting into college is your purpose, instead of your purpose is to like help others in our community and to volunteer and doing something actually substantive and contributing meaningfully in a bigger community.
I'm not going that far. I have a very strong negative reaction to that sort of, I'm just a part of my community, oh, let's all hold hands, kumbaya, stuff. Like, I reject that. I acknowledge that. I don't even like the phrase you used earlier, it takes a village. Like, I reject that as well. Like, I think that our identities are formed somewhat socially, but I think that you should be judicious about what community, quote unquote, you use to help develop your identity. And I think the family is the natural boundary for that. I don't think you want to have too many connections everywhere in order to build your identity. You want the core of that to be your family, your relatives, and then, you know, another 10% outside of that to be your close friends, and then another 10% outside of that to be, you know, your random hoo-has in your neighborhood and stuff. And I think too, I also slightly push back against, I mean, I see what you're saying. We do hyper focus on college attainment now, but I think it's important to inculcate an individualistic drive into your kids, because I think that sort of drive towards innovation, ambition, and self-attainment is what actually pushes society forward. But it shouldn't be an isolated self-focus. It should be a self-focus with the aim towards enriching, your family, taking care of your close loved ones. And if you want to use family and community interchangeably, I guess that's okay. I am not comfortable extending that community umbrella to people who you don't actually have a personal relationship with.
Yeah, I guess I'm just saying that the idea of responsibility cannot be simply responsibility for, like, if you just said to a kid, I preach responsibility, you need your grades are your responsibility, which they are, and like working hard and all of that. But I think that it is useful and meaningful to say that you have a responsibility to your
Yeah.
family and your and I will extend to community, the tight knit like community. I'm gonna say that's like family and extended family, and I don't want to parcel out because we could just debate what constitutes the difference in community and family, but I'll use them interchangeably for a moment and say that, like, in order for that responsibility to be substantive and richly rewarding and create a sense of belonging, I think that responsibility has to extend beyond, you know, uh, your own, like, kind of, I'd say, like, grades are largely self-serving. I know there's a higher end ultimately is to go get the college, to get the job, to get the, to live the good life or whatever. But I think there's some degree of immediacy that needs to be impressed upon young people, and so that responsibility to be there for others to some degree, like, and I mean this through, like, it can be dual serving. Almost everything we do is dual serving. Like, so you are volunteering and you're getting some hours or whatever too,
Yeah,
or I don't like the hyper focus on the college attainment and then everything being through that lens, and it's sort of a self-serving
sure, I
lens.
understand
And I think
that. I understand that and agree that there's a hyper focus, but college, I don't think college should be, I don't think it should be an amalgam of volunteering and philosophical enrichment and all of this stuff. Like, it's a tool with a purpose. And so if you have a goal and that tool helps you reach the goal, then you pursue college. And if it doesn't help you reach the goal, then you don't pursue college. And if your goal is to form closer community ties or family ties, then there are other tools to reach that goal, like perhaps volunteering with your church or with some other organization or whatever. And so it's the parent's job to start their kid on all these different paths towards whatever goals to attain. And college is one of those. So is hyper focus on college a good thing? No, but focus on college, I think, is a good thing if that's, the path that you're pursuing. Does that make sense? Like, can you understand the distinction that I'm trying to make there?
yeah, and I think I agree with you in the abstract that what educational institutions should be doing, and then whether they actually attempting to do is a little bit different.
Right,
They are
yes.
trying to be, they're trying to be
Right,
everything.
yeah.
So then the question goes: how do we approach? How do we approach colleges or learning institutions, given that they are trying to provide everything, including, like, character and all of that? They're trying to be philosophy and friendship and
Hmm.
family and volunteer. It's like, okay, well, that's what they're offering, or at least they're claiming to offer that. Should we, as like a family interacting with this institution, take a different approach
Yeah.
and just say, no, 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 you're just here for my, for what I want? Like, can I custom tailor it? I don't, that's a whole other
Well,
discussion.
let me maybe we can conclude with, I have one analogy, and it may seem kind of out of left field, but I'll try to bring it back together. So in the same way that we are relying on college to do everything, right, to be a sense of community, family, volunteering, the the
Yeah.
the narrow grade achievement, everything, and a rite of passage in a way, a key into adulthood, but also not a prolonged adolescence. Like, we're relying on it for everything. It's as if we've lost the ability to narrowly tailor our institutions or tools. And the analogy that I want to compare this to is actually smartphones, which I've complained about for ever since smartphones really became a thing. To me, smartphones feel like a device without a purpose, or rather a device with every purpose. And I feel like that's how they've been pitched to us is it's a tool that can do everything. It's a utopian vision of technology. It can be a phone, it can be a word processor, it can be your gateway into the social
There's
world.
an app for that.
There's an app for
Yeah.
that. It's a GPS, it's a calculator, it's everything you could ever want. And that's kind of what we're putting that responsibility on college as well. We've seen the detrimental effects of the smartphone on society. Maybe that's a controversial topic, a provocative topic that we can talk about in some
But it
other
definitely
podcast.
has been.
But it has, and I think the same can be said for college. And I think just culturally, we need to get away from the idea that any one thing that we create can do everything that we need. Like this, like utopia itself has been proven impossible multiple times through our history. And so why do we keep insisting that we can have utopia either in technological form or institutional form or whatever? It's impossible. Why don't we efficiently and narrowly tailor our creations to accomplish the goal that we want? Wouldn't that make more sense?
I will really have to think about that, and I think I agree with you. But like, beware the panacea. There is no cure
Yeah,
all.
there's not
There's
that.
no it and it. The reason this is unnerving is last night I was watching. There's some device that's coming out called the Rabbit, and they were talking about large language models. And I really am going to wrap this up. But like I said, the problem with large language models is that there's no action. Like it can do things, but we have developed our first language action model. So it combines large language models and or large action model, not language action, but large action model. So the idea was that you say something like, and it was critiquing the app-based system of phones, but in the opposite direction that you were saying. So it would say you have to open up this app to do all these different things. Why can't you just say,
Yeah.
get me an Uber or play this song, and it actually pulls it up, and all you have to do is kind of, and it's this pocket device that connects with your, once you've approved everything on your computer, like it's basically AI in handheld form that will just plan me a trip, book these tickets, get me an SUV, and do it all for 3 people on these dates, and it will provide. It'll just be like accept, 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 and do all of it. And but like it's the utopian like device is the problem. Like and it takes away some ownership of you working.
Yeah.
Like the richness of a trip is partly like planning and doing the hard work. And I agree with you that we should use specific tools, and we should use less tools, and we should understand the tools intimately.
Yes.
Yeah. So instead of like being bombarded with everything, and so we're definitely not trending in that direction. And all the trends though have indicated like like they've been ironically chiseling away at us, the human and the mind.
Right.
And
Well, there's
and
this
so we have to acknowledge that.
there's this concept of cognitive offloading, and that's what a lot of our technology is. It allows us to offload some of our cognitive capacity and let our devices think for us, essentially.
Yeah.
And we've always portrayed that as a good thing because it frees us. It frees us up to think about other things. But maybe it doesn't free us. It steals parts of our mind and reduces our ultimate capacity to use our mind and distributes it in a less effective way across other devices. That's an extreme characterization of cognitive offloading, but that's what it feels like is
I think
happening.
it does. I think you might be right though, because then if we get used to cognitive offloading, then we don't have the analytical function and the critical thinking necessary to discern for ourselves the best decisions. We just are accepting whatever we've offloaded onto.
Yeah.
Like
Right. It's too hard. It's too hard to do. Once you get used to offloading everything, it's too hard to use your brain to actually do that stuff again.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Why work out when we can sit on a comfy couch and eat fattening food? Well, we've created well, Cosmo's got a lot to look forward
Yep.
to. Is what I'm Cosmo Lester.
Cosmo Lester, well, we can just let him listen to the podcast, and you can offload your parenting duties onto the podcast and take it easy
you
for
go.
a few years.
I'll just let him listen to this episode when he's 13, and he'll be like, "Yeah,
just give him a
I agree with everything."
give him an
and he'll
iPhone.
Be cautious.
Give him an
and
iPhone
responsible.
with the Third Space podcast app already loaded up on it.
iPhone 26.
Yeah, right.
I do like. I wonder if it won't be about. I want a phone with apps, and it'll be like, I want this AI.
Yeah, I want this
assistant
hover chip.
thing. Man, hover. Yeah. All right, man. That's enough for me.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Do 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 do.
Right.
Bye.